Say a speeding car hit a bicyclist and two pedestrians and then took off. This was on Valley Spring just before 8 p.m.
Well, it was so dark we couldn't really see anything, but we could hear them screaming. We could hear them screaming for help.
Whether it's for a video or YouTubers just living their daily lives, there have been some pretty close calls for some of our favorite internet superstars. On today's most amazing top 10 list, I'll be covering just a few of the times that our favorite YouTubers almost passed away. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have Tanner Fox. Tanner Fox got into a really scary car accident in 2016. He was in a car with two friends named Danny and Maverick, and they were just going for a drive down some curvy roads because they were super bored. Maverick was driving and Tanner was in the passenger seat with his feet on the dashboard, which you really shouldn't ever do because it's super dangerous and was the reason that Tanner got more injured in the crash than the other two did. They were going around a long turn, going around 35 or 40 miles per hour, which was apparently the speed limit in that area, and something happened where the steering wheel or the brakes got jammed or something like that, and they ended up going straight towards the cliff's edge. Tanner said that he knew they were about to crash, so he prepared himself for impact and closed his eyes. They hit a sign pole and then he felt them go airborne. They ended up landing about 45 feet away, upside down on a truck bed. He opened his eyes and began getting out of the car. He knew his leg was broken immediately. He tried the door, but it wouldn't open, so he crawled out the window. This is when Danny called to him for help because Danny had a cut on both his hand and his head, so they were scared that he was losing too much blood, but luckily that wasn't the case. All three boys managed to walk away from the accident and were treated at the hospital for all of the injuries that they sustained. This is so scary and could have been so much worse, so I am so glad that they are all okay and have recovered. In our number 9 spot today we have Marcus and Kristen Johns. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up if you're enjoying the video so far because it really helps us out. On May 11th, 2020 at 7:56 p.m., Marcus and Kristen were going out for their daily evening bike ride together on their electric bike. It was one of their favorite things to do in the evening, but they had no idea what was about to happen. They were riding on a dead-end street that had a lot of stop signs and speed bumps, so they weren't super worried about anything crazy happening. But Marcus heard a car zooming super fast and saw it about a football field's length away. He turned to Kristen and said, "Oh my gosh, what is that guy doing?" And by the time he finished that sentence, the car was just feet away from him. Marcus had known there was a stop sign and assumed that the speeding car would have stopped, but unfortunately this was not the case. Marcus saw the car swerve in their direction and he tried his best to swerve out of the way, but the car was just going too fast. They ended up flying over the car and landing about 50 feet away, which is so crazy. They both suffered some pretty serious injuries and were in the hospital for a while, but they had each other. The person who hit them completely fled the scene, and since it's obviously a huge crime that they just committed, there has been an investigation. I'm not sure if they found the person who hit them or what exactly the details behind them speeding so fast were, because the couple is unable to share what they know due to the investigation and the fact that it is still ongoing. I hope someone in the area was able to get some kind of information that can help police find who did this, because it's absolutely horrible. I'm so glad that Kristen and Marcus are healing well and have had each other and their faith to turn to throughout this whole ordeal. In our number 8 spot today we have Casey Neistat. Around Christmas time in 2008, Casey and his friend Graham set off to climb a mountain that is the tallest mountain in the southern and western hemisphere at 22,841 feet tall. They flew to Santiago, Chile with no special training but a lot of willpower. The mountain apparently isn't a super technical mountain, so they didn't need ice picks or ropes or any of that sort of thing, but it is still extremely dangerous because of its height. So dangerous that around 3 people a year pass away trying to climb it, and it has been nicknamed Death Mountain. They decided to hike this mountain with no porters, who are the people who help you carry all of your gear, no guide, and no GPS. Just a map and a pencil. They were hiking for 3 days before they saw the actual mountain that they were trying to summit. They had a saying that they used to get them through this difficult time, saying summit or bust, which was their way of saying that nothing was going to stop them from reaching the top of that mountain. Once they reached 20,000 feet, there are no helicopters or rescue crews that go that high, so they really were on their own. Once they got close to the summit, Casey kept blacking out, most likely from the altitude, but they kept going. He said all he wanted to do was lay down and take a nap, but he wasn't sure if that he would wake up if he did. They had a turnaround time at 2:00 p.m., which is the time that no matter what, you're supposed to turn around and head back down. When 2:00 rolled around, they didn't turn around, but kept going for hours, which is super dangerous. Casey says he was in such bad shape that he has no memory of the day at all, and the only reason he remembers is because of the footage they have from that day. They ended up making it all the way to the top, which is an incredible feat.
This is it. This is me summiting the tallest mountain in the southern and western hemisphere.
They ended up making it back down the mountain, and I'm sure that they had a nice long rest and recovery period after really pushing their bodies to the limit. In our number 7 spot today, we have BF vs GF. Jen Smith, whose channel used to be called BF vs GF, was vlogging on a trip in San Francisco with her then boyfriend. They were taking one of the open streetcars that takes you through the rolling hills of San Fran when Jen really came close to death, or at least an extremely serious injury. The boyfriend was filming her as she stuck her head off the side of the streetcar. At the same time, we see another streetcar traveling the opposite direction coming straight for them, exactly where Jen's head was. The other streetcar honks, the boyfriend kind of tries to warn her by saying watch your head, but she really doesn't realize what's happening until the very last second. She quickly finally pulls her head in just as the streetcar reaches them and passes.
Watch your head.
Oh my god! What the hell?
It was an extremely close call, and she honestly doesn't seem that shaken up by the incident, which is pretty impressive because that would have been very scary. In our number 6 spot today, we have Marcus Veltri. One day a few months ago, Marcus was talking to a friend and snacking on some salt and vinegar almonds. He had had almonds before, but only 1 or 2 at a time because he doesn't really like them very much. But since he loves salt and vinegar and these ones were flavored, he liked them, so he ate a bunch. Turns out, he didn't know that he was allergic. His face started to get itchy, and since that usually happens when he needs to shave his facial hair, he thought that that's what was happening, so he tried to go and shave. Then his girlfriend came into the bathroom and was like, "You're red and itchy everywhere," and she just knew that something wasn't right. He was in denial at first, but his girlfriend persisted and made him go to the emergency room. As they were driving there, his whole face was swelling and his throat began closing and even his tongue was swelling.
As we were driving there, my face started swelling up, my cheeks got big, my eyes were so swollen that I could barely even keep them open.
His breathing was beginning to get extremely difficult, and when they got to emergency, he was just focusing on staying alive. Eventually, his nose was completely closed up, and he could only breathe through his mouth, which was already extremely difficult. They finally gave him a bunch of allergy medication and gave him a breathing tube. After an hour, things began to get a bit better and they confirmed that he would be okay and just to continue to monitor his reaction. They asked the doctor what would have happened if they waited a little longer before coming to the hospital, and the doctor said that due to the fact the swelling was happening extremely fast, that if they had waited, they might not have reached the hospital in time before his throat completely closed. Thank goodness his girlfriend was with him and was able to recognize that something was seriously wrong. In our number 5 spot today, we have Sham Idris. One morning around 6 a.m., Sham and his wife were traveling to New York in their car. They were driving around a corner when they realized an older man driving a car in the opposite direction had lost control and was headed straight for them. Sham tried to go a little bit left in order to avoid the vehicle, but unfortunately there wasn't enough room for him to get out of the way, and it all happened incredibly fast and the vehicles ended up colliding head on. They got out of the car and they were unsure if the other driver, the older man, was seriously injured or stuck or just in shock because he wasn't leaving his car. Since it was on the curve of the road, there was little to no visibility of the accident to any other driver who was unknowingly approaching. This made their dangerous situation even scarier. They were trying to make sure everyone was okay and get the man to safety, but they had to get out of the road because this two-car accident was about to turn into a multi-car accident. The pair ended up luckily walking away, as well as everyone else who was in the car with them. People asked why they vlogged the aftermath of the incident, which is a pretty fair question, but the couple explained that they were in such shock, and since they are used to vlogging basically everything that they do, it was sort of just like a subconscious reaction. Also, it's their traumatic moment, so I feel like however they want to respond, as long as it isn't hurting anyone further, is pretty fair. I'm super glad that they were both okay, apart from their minor injuries that they luckily had treated at the hospital. In our number 4 spot today, we have Corpse Husband. Corpse Husband has recently shot to fame and is one of the most famous faceless YouTubers and streamers. A few months ago in a live stream, he was talking about how quickly his life changed this year in such a short span of time. He was talking about some health issues that he faces, as well as other things, but one thing that really stood out is a scary moment that he endured earlier in the year. He kind of grazed over it and didn't really go into any detail, so I'm not exactly sure what happened or what led him to this situation, but he said he had a moment where he was almost killed and someone was literally pointing a gun at him.
Like, it's been a really weird year. For sure, like I literally almost got killed earlier this year. Like, legitimately had a gun pulled at me, I was almost murdered.
That is such an insane scenario for someone to be in, and I really wish he elaborated and told us all a little bit more, but I also completely respect his privacy. Maybe one day he'll open up and tell us more about how he got there, but I'm just glad that he is totally okay and that he made it through and has been experiencing a life-changing year. In our number 3 spot today, we have Christy Sita.
So this is June 30, 2014. Swipe. June 30, 2014 at 3:40.
Christy Sita had a life-changing experience in June of 2014. She had just graduated high school a year early because she wanted to move to a bigger city in order to pursue her career as a dancer. She graduated on June 25th and a few days later was heading to the lake with her friends to enjoy some summer weather before it was time for her to take off and move. They were at Ruby Lake on the Sunshine Coast and were enjoying an extremely beautiful day and were going tubing. They decided to take a break from tubing for a little bit and went over to the area of the lake where people take a rest and can lay on the sand on the beach. Some people got off the boat to grab some things, but Christy stayed on with 2 other friends. Another boat of friends pulled up and they decided to head to a spot in the middle of the lake, anchor up and hang out there. The friends who left to go and get stuff were taking too long, so they just decided to go ahead without them. The tube they were using before was too big to fit down into the boat, so it was just resting on the back as they were leaving. The tube ended up falling out of the back of the boat and only Christy noticed, and she went to go and save it. She grabbed the rope that was holding the tube, but it ended up getting tangled and jerked her and basically threw her into the water. She didn't really know exactly what had happened, but she knew that her shoulder really hurt. She went to raise her left hand out of the water to wave to the others to come back and get her, and that's when she realized that her left hand had been completely taken off. She was in total shock and went into fight mode, so she luckily wasn't feeling pain, and although she was losing blood, she kept treading water and kept herself afloat. Her friends ended up coming back for her and wrapped her hand up tightly until help arrived. She ended up being flown to a children's hospital on a helicopter, and they did an amazing surgery, and while they were unable to save her hand, they set her up to be very successful and to be able to live as similar of a life as possible to the one she was living before this accident. It's a crazy story, but Christy is honestly so inspiring with how brave and strong and positive she is about the whole situation. In our number 2 spot today, we have Jay Swingler. One half of the TGF Bro channel, Jay had a near-death experience in 2017. He decided he wanted to put his head in a microwave filled with polyfiller until it dried. I'm not exactly sure what the point of this was, but it's quite an interesting idea that no one should ever do, ever. They at least thought of the fact that he would need a breathing tube, which is probably the only thing that saved him. Once the polyfiller dried, they realized that they didn't account for the expansion of the polyfiller, and of course they were unable to get it off of his head, and Jay began to absolutely panic.
I need to breathe through here.
His head's not coming out.
No, my head's stuck.
Oh
thing is
my
so
God.
heavy. As long as I can breathe, I'm good. Yeah.
That's solid.
No, breathe.
After they tried themselves to get the microwave off of his head, they did the right thing and called emergency services. The fire department ended up coming to help save them, and eventually they were able to remove the microwave.
Got the microwave. So put him on a...
Oh my God.
It is such a relief that Jay was okay, but man, what a terrible idea. We have Hey Ex Natalie. This story starts on a mountain where Natalie and her cousins had camped out the night before in order to be able to see that sunrise and for her to capture some beautiful footage with her brand new drone. Before she started flying it, she knew she had a bad feeling but decided to still do it anyway. After all, what's the worst that could happen, right? Well, she flew the drone up and for some reason something began to malfunction and she ended up having to emergency land the drone at the bottom of the cliff from where they were at. They decided to go and look for it thinking that this would be an easy hike down. They left the trail to go and hike around the mountain to try and find it. They were beginning to get super tired and the sun was coming out so it was really hot. So they had the terrible idea to just drop their heavy backpacks that had all of their survival gear and just continue on without them. After 2 to 3 hours of hiking, they got to the area where the drone should be, a clip from 8:06 to 8:11. Basically, long story short, Natalie ends up splitting away from her cousins to go further down the mountain to try and find the drone, and all she has is her camera and her phone. She's following where the drone app says that her drone is, and eventually she sees it and realizes that it's now above her in a spot that you would literally have to rock climb to get to, and this is when she begins to panic. She realized that she was completely stuck because she couldn't get back up to where she left her cousins, and she also couldn't go down because it was too steep to slide down. At this point, rock avalanches are also happening around her. She luckily had cell phone service at this point and only 13% battery left and ended up making the call to 911. They were able to get her coordinates and the search and rescue team at the mountain were able to contact her, but they asked how much food and water she had with her, to which the answer was obviously zero. She ended up trying to continue climbing up the really steep mountain instead of just sitting and waiting all day into the night to be rescued, and was luckily able to get to a safer area where the team ended up finding her, and they also went and saved the drone, which was super nice of them. All in all, this is a crazy story for Natalie, and I'm so glad her and the drone made it out safely. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thank you so much for checking it out. I've been your host, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time!